All of today's stories are real ghost encounter submissions from r/ghost stories. Before we begin, if you enjoy my content, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. Now, sit back, relax, and have a good nap. My town had a quiet hour. Last night, I found out why. I grew up in a tiny town in northern Maine. Population barely 900 people. The kind of place where everyone knows your truck by the sound of the engine. But the weirdest thing about the town wasn't the isolation. It was the quiet hour. Every night at exactly 1:13 a.m., every single person stayed inside for 1 hour. No lights on, no phones, no windows open, nothing. As a kid, I thought it was some old tradition, like a weird small-town superstition. If you asked about it, adults would say, "Some things out there only notice you if you notice them first." No one explained further. Last month, my mom died, so I moved back home to clean out her house before selling it. I hadn't lived there in 12 years. Honestly, I'd forgotten about the quiet hour completely until my first night back. At 1:10 a.m., my phone buzzed, a town emergency alert. Quiet hour begins in 3 minutes. Lock all entrances. Do not look outside. I actually laughed. I thought maybe the town had turned the old superstition into some dumb community thing. Then every light on the street went dark at once. Not one porch light remained. The entire town became pitch black. That's when I heard it. Footsteps, slow, wet, directly outside my house. I froze near the kitchen window. My first thought was someone messing with me. Teenagers, maybe. Then something tapped on the glass. Not a knock, a fingernail, dragging slowly downward. I should have ignored it. Everyone always said not to look outside during quiet hour. Instead, I peeked through the blinds. There was a woman standing in my front yard. At least, I think it was a woman. She wore a long gray dress soaked black at the bottom, like she'd walked through deep water. Her hair hung over her face completely. But what made my stomach drop was her height. She was impossibly tall. Her head nearly touched the low tree branches over my yard, and she was perfectly still. Then my phone buzzed again. Another emergency alert. Do not let them see you watching. The second my screen lit up, the woman's head snapped toward my window. I ducked immediately. Then came the sprinting. Not toward the house, around it. Fast footsteps circling the walls over and over. I heard fingernails scraping the siding, windows rattling, something laughing softly right outside my bedroom wall. I stayed curled on the kitchen floor, trying not to breathe. Then I heard my mother's voice. Upstairs. Eli. I stopped cold. My mom had been dead for 3 weeks. Eli, come upstairs, honey. Exactly her voice. Perfectly. A floorboard creaked above me. Something was walking through the hallway. I almost answered automatically. That's the scary part. For half a second, my brain genuinely believed it was her. Then I remembered something my grandfather told me when I was little. They only sound human when you're lonely. The footsteps stopped directly above me. Silence. Then, a single whisper right beside the kitchen window. He looked at me. Not you. He, like it was talking to someone else. Suddenly, every dog in town started screaming. Not barking. Screaming. And from somewhere outside, dozens of footsteps began running through the streets all at once. I don't remember much after that. I hid under the kitchen table, covering my ears until sunlight came through the curtains. At 2:14 a.m., exactly, everything stopped. No footsteps, no whispers, nothing. The next morning, The town acted completely normal. People waved at me. The diner opened at 6. Nobody mentioned the night before. Finally, I asked the cashier, an old woman named Ruth, what the quiet hour actually was. She stared at me for a long time before answering. Then she quietly asked, "You looked outside, didn't you?" I didn't answer. Her face went pale immediately. She reached under the counter and handed me a folded piece of paper. On it was a list of names. Hundreds of them. Every person in town who had ever looked outside during quiet hour. Next to each name was a date. And beside some of the dates was a second note written in red ink. Heard their family. Afterward, I found my grandfather's name near the bottom, then my mother's. Before I could ask anything else, Ruth whispered, "You need to leave town before tonight." I asked her, "What happens if I stay?" She looked toward the dark woods behind the diner windows and said, "They start talking to you during the daytime." My old house was horrifyingly haunted. At least, everyone in my family believes so to this day. The house had been built by my great-grandfather decades ago, and it was enormous. The kind of place where entire sections sat empty for years. Long hallways, unused bedrooms, creaking staircases, balconies that overlooked dark courtyards. Honestly, if ghosts were looking for real estate, this place was perfect. I was only around 9 when we finally moved out, so a lot of my memories are blurry. But there are certain things I'll never forget. Almost every night, people in the house would hear strange sounds. Children whispering, crying in the distance, footsteps when no one was there. The creepy part is that it wasn't just me imagining things. My mother, grandmother, and brother all remember it too. I also used to sleepwalk constantly in that house. Apparently, I'd wander into hallways or stand silently in random rooms in the middle of the night. The strange thing, the sleepwalking completely stopped after we moved away. But the incident that still gives me chills happened one quiet evening when my dad was away on a work trip. It was just me, my older brother, my mother, and my grandmother at home. My brother and I were playing in my grandmother's side of the house when the sun began to set. The atmosphere suddenly felt unnaturally quiet. No traffic outside, no wind, nothing. Then my grandmother casually asked my brother to go upstairs and switch on the balcony lights. In my country, people often turn on outside lights after dark to ward off bad spirits or burglars, depending on who you ask. My brother, who was only 3 years older than me, immediately refused to go alone and dragged me with him. We climbed the staircase slowly, me a few steps behind him. Then he froze. I was about to ask what was wrong when I heard it too. Thump, thump, thump. It sounded like something heavy was slamming violently into the walls upstairs. Then the lights started flickering, not gently, violently. My stomach dropped. Neither of us moved for a second. We just stood there, listening to the crashing sounds echo through the dark hallway above us. And then survival instincts kicked in. I turned around and sprinted downstairs so fast I'm surprised I didn't fall down the stairs. My brother was right behind me. We were both hysterical by the time we reached my grandmother. Instead of panicking, she immediately started reciting prayers. The noises continued for several seconds more. Loud bangs, scraping, crashing, before suddenly stopping altogether. Silence. Absolute silence. Eventually, my grandmother and our driver went upstairs to check. What they found terrified everyone. One of those small, rideable toy cars was moving on its own, repeatedly crashing into the walls and furniture. Back and forth, back and forth. The worst part, when they carried it downstairs and checked it, there were no batteries inside. Even now, my mother refuses to talk too much about that house. She says that whenever my father traveled for work, she would lock herself in my brother's room with us because the noises became unbearable at night. Doors would slam open and shut on their own. Footsteps echoed through empty rooms. Sometimes it sounded like people were having conversations somewhere else in the house. More than once, my dad had to cut work trips short because everyone at home was too terrified to stay there alone. We did experience a few strange incidents even after moving out, but nothing like that house. And thankfully, things have been quiet ever since. The older house we used to live in never felt completely normal. On paper, it was perfect. It was in a quiet residential area, spacious, airy, and filled with natural light during the day. Anyone visiting would have called it a beautiful home, but at night, it became something else entirely. Over the 8 to 9 years we lived there, my family and I experienced too many strange things to dismiss as coincidence. None of it was violently terrifying, like in horror movies, which somehow made it worse. It felt subtle, quiet, like something unseen simply existed alongside us. One of the most common things we heard were footsteps. Not ordinary footsteps either. It sounded like someone sprinting from the kitchen to the bathroom at full speed. The sound was unmistakable. Rapid footsteps across the floor, stopping abruptly. The creepiest part was that it happened most clearly when the house was empty. One time, everyone had gone away for the holidays, except my mother. She heard the running again while completely alone in the building. But she wasn't the only one. All of us had heard it at different times over the years. Sleep paralysis also became strangely common in that house. More than once, I woke up unable to move, feeling like someone was standing nearby, watching me. Then there were moments that made absolutely no sense. One evening, I was alone in the kitchen, washing dishes, when I suddenly heard my mother whisper excitedly from the bedroom window, "Hey, come here. I want to show you something." It sounded exactly like her voice. Naturally, I replied, "Coming," and walked toward the bedroom without thinking. I was literally about to lift the curtain near the window to see what she wanted when I suddenly remembered my parents had gone out for the evening. The house was empty. To this day, thinking about how close I came to pulling back that curtain still makes my stomach drop. What's strange is that despite everything, we never left because of it. The incidents weren't constant, and they never felt openly malicious. Honestly, I'm a huge horror fan, so part of me was fascinated by it. Maybe we all just got used to living with whatever was there. For years, we kept convincing ourselves it was probably imagination. But after a while, there were simply too many incidents. The final thing I witnessed there happened about a month before we moved out, and it's the one memory I can never explain away. I was studying late at night for an exam the next morning. I remember checking the time, somewhere around 3 to 3:30 a.m. I was fully awake, exhausted but focused. Then, suddenly, something shot across the room. It was black, shapeless, almost spherical. The closest thing I can compare it to is a Dementor, moving at impossible speed. It flew past me so fast that I barely processed it before it slammed through the wall near the window leading outside. And when it passed through, there was an actual sound, like a burst of heavy air hitting something. I froze. I remember staring toward the window for what felt like forever, trying to understand what I had just seen. But eventually, I just went back to studying, not because I wasn't terrified, but because by then the fear had become strangely familiar. Living in that house had taught us to continue with life, even when things made no sense. And somehow, after that night, the activity stopped. It honestly felt like whatever had been there knew we were leaving, and left too. I've lived in a few houses that I genuinely believe were haunted, so I've collected more than a handful of stories over the years. This encounter, though, is one that still unsettles me whenever I think about it. We moved into an old house that had originally been built by a married couple sometime in the 1950s. The place had a strange atmosphere from the beginning, not necessarily threatening at first, just heavy, like the house didn't want new people in it. The landlord certainly didn't help. He was the type of guy who treated the property like it was nothing special, despite how much history it clearly carried. Every so often, he'd randomly show up and cut down old trees around the property, trees that had likely stood there since the original owners lived there. And every single time he did, the activity inside the house intensified. Almost immediately after the trees were removed, we'd start hearing loud stomping noises coming from the upper floor. Not creaks, actual footsteps. Heavy, angry, pacing that sounded so real, we genuinely questioned whether someone had secretly moved into the upstairs area without us knowing. An older neighbor later told us that one of the original owners had died inside the house. That explained a lot. One day, while exploring what we jokingly called the dungeon, basically a long, dark shed behind the house, I found an old bottle of suntan lotion buried in the corner. It looked ancient, straight out of the 1950s, almost like a forgotten personal item left behind decades earlier. I brought it inside to show my mom. That was a mistake. Not long after bringing it into the house, the atmosphere completely changed. There was this sudden feeling of tension, like the entire place had become agitated. Then things started happening. Objects were violently knocked off a shelf in the living room, crashing onto the floor out of nowhere. At almost the same moment, we heard something running across the ceiling above us. The only way I can describe it is that it sounded like a giant rat, except impossibly heavy, almost human-sized. Fast scratching, scrambling footsteps raced overhead, while things continued falling around us. It stopped only after I returned the bottle to the exact spot where I'd found it. After that, the house calmed down again. But the strangest experiences happened upstairs. The very first night I slept in my bedroom there, I woke up to loud snoring inside the room. Not distant snoring. Close, deep, unmistakably human snoring. I remember lying there half asleep, genuinely assuming one of my family members had come into my room and fallen asleep on the floor. That's how real it sounded. But when I turned on the light, no one was there. Another time, a friend was staying in the upstairs section of the house. While we were making up a bed for him, we both clearly heard knocking coming from inside one of the old wardrobes. 3 slow knocks. We froze, then opened it immediately. Nothing. No one inside. My younger nephew hated the staircase leading upstairs. He refused to walk past it alone because, in his words, he felt pure evil coming from the upper level. Hearing a child describe something like that so seriously was deeply unsettling. Then there were the smaller incidents that slowly wore us down over time. My phone once disappeared completely, only to reappear later in a bizarre place where I know I hadn't left it. Another time, I found a strange video saved on my phone that I never recorded. The footage was distorted and blurry, almost slowed down, showing the living room from an odd angle. There was a low humming sound in the background, and the strangest part was that the timestamp didn't match the actual length of the video. Even now, I'm pretty sure it's still buried somewhere in my camera roll. But by far, the worst experiences were physical. Several times, I suddenly felt an intense burning sensation on my skin, only to discover fresh scratches appearing across my body. They were always hot to the touch, angry red, and almost always came in groups of 3. At first, I convinced myself it had to be accidental, but after it kept happening, I started wondering if maybe the entity in that house wasn't the old couple after all.